MMOs are a weird genre. If you're like me and played back in the heyday, you probably have a lot of love for them. But it might also feel like the genre hasn't really evolved, or worse, that it's slowly dying. World of Warcraft is still alive and kicking, but it's not quite what it used to be. Since its success, countless MMOs have tried to follow in its footsteps. Some, like Elder Scrolls Online or Lord of the Rings Online, have carved out loyal fan bases, but none ever truly broke free of WoW's shadow. And even now, 2 decades later, we haven't seen much meaningful evolution. Maybe it's because most new MMOs are still trying to be WoW, just with a different coat of paint or some gimmick to try to make it unique. And that usually leads to something that just feels lesser. But maybe the inspiration modern developers need isn't in the Goliaths of the genre. Maybe it's in some of the games we forgot about along the way. Let's go way back to my childhood in 2005. It was a beautiful time. MMOs were exploding in popularity, but nobody really knew what the genre was supposed to be yet. World of Warcraft had just rewritten the rulebook, and suddenly every studio wanted a piece of that magic. In the midst of the action came Guild Wars, a true anomaly in the MMO genre that launched side by side with WoW. But it didn't try to out-WoW World of Warcraft. It didn't have a subscription fee, it didn't have a full-scale open world, and it didn't try to bury players in an endless grind. It had a short but powerful run in the MMO spotlight, not because it followed the trend, but because it was weird and one of a kind. So what's the deal with Guild Wars? At face value, it looks like any other MMORPG. You pick a class, build a character, run around doing quests, getting gear, and leveling up. But under the surface, there are some key and sometimes subtle elements that set it apart. For one, the entire world is instance-based. Every mission, every explorable zone, every town. You're not sharing space with hundreds of players like in a traditional MMO. Instead, once you leave a hub city, you're dropped into your own private version of the world for you and your party. That party could be made up of other players, but if you're solo, you can fill out the team with NPC henchmen or fully customizable AI heroes. It's a structure that makes Guild Wars feel more like a classic RPG than a living, breathing MMO. The game is also much more streamlined. Instead of chasing an endless endgame grind, Guild Wars centers around one of 4 story-driven campaigns, each released individually over time. You work through them in a mostly linear fashion with only a handful of side quests or optional content along the way. The level cap is just 20, and you'll usually hit that about a third of the way through a campaign. From there, it's not about getting stronger, it's about getting smarter, experimenting with builds, tweaking your skills, and finding synergy within your party. And this is where the game really shines. At first glance, the character customization might seem straightforward, but underneath it's layered, flexible, and surprisingly challenging. There are 10 different classes, with some locked behind specific campaigns, and early on you'll choose a secondary class to combine with your primary. That means every character is essentially a hybrid, pulling from 2 separate skill pools to create a unique build. It sounds like a lot of freedom, and it is, but Guild Wars balances that freedom with a harsh limitation. You can only have 8 skills on your skill bar at a time, out of hundreds. That restriction forces you to think carefully about every slot. It's not just about throwing on the 8 best abilities, it's about what works together and what works right now for the particular challenge you're facing. On top of that, roles aren't as rigidly defined as you might expect from an MMO. Sure, the classic healer, tank, and DPS roles exist as options, but it doesn't play out in the traditional sense. This is primarily because of the aggro system. Classes spec'd more tanky don't have the abilities to increase threat and pull enemies towards them. Instead, enemies target whoever's closest, whoever's squishiest, or whoever's throwing out big damage or healing. This plays so well directly back into the limited skill bar and changes the way you think about how you build your character. A support might be less about raw healing and more about condition removal and protection. A DPS might focus on interrupting enemy casters or spreading debuffs instead of raw damage output. And every character, no matter their role, needs at least some way to take care of themselves. I played the Ritualist mostly, and my go-to strategy was the Spirit Wall, dropping a row of summoned spirits between me and the enemy. It gave the AI something else to attack and bought me time to breathe. But it didn't just protect me, it created a buffer that my whole team could play around. Many of those spirits also applied debuffs to nearby enemies, which made the wall not just a shield, but a form of crowd control. And if I really wanted to lean into that strategy more, there were plenty of skills I could take to keep my spirits alive longer. But then the question becomes, what do I lose by taking them? That's the game. What role do you want to play in a fight, and how do you refine that role down to a razor's edge? It actually feels a little bit more like deck building in a trading card game than it does a traditional MMORPG. Because of how the aggro works, and because you're constantly constrained by that 8 skill limit, Guild Wars PvE actually starts to feel a lot like PvP. It's subtle at first, but once you hit the tougher missions and really start fine-tuning your build, thinking about who you bring with you and why, you start to see the value in strategies that seemed weak or even boring at first. A player might spend a significant portion of the game trying to kill, only to realize on a tougher mission that it might be more effective to put the heavy damage aside and put all of your energy towards interrupting enemy casters. And it's incredibly satisfying to create that build, execute it, and see the difference it made for your whole team. And it's not an accident either. The game literally gives you an interrupt henchman that you can recruit for your team. They knew exactly what they were doing. So let's talk about the PvP. Guild Wars has some of the most competitive and well-designed PvP I've experienced in the genre. And that's probably because, as we've already discussed, the entire game is built around this kind of combat. Every skill choice, every tactical decision, it all feeds into the same core systems you use in PvE. But when you bring that into a live match against real players, it hits differently. There are a variety of ways to jump in. There's the random arena for quick 4v4 skirmishes, the more structured team arenas, and of course the guild vs guild battles for the big dogs. There's also Heroes Ascent, which is more of a PvP progression ladder. And if you're playing the Factions campaign, there are large-scale alliance battles that tie directly into the story's faction war. You can also create PvP-only characters. No leveling, no gear farming, just jump straight in at max level with access to your unlocked skills and start theory crafting. It cuts out the fluff and drops you right into the competitive arena. The one trade-off is that PvP-only characters can't access any PvE areas, which means you'll miss out on some of the cosmetic rewards like titles, prestige armor, and all the other drip. So is Guild Wars worth playing now in 2025? The answer is yes and no. This game stands out as a unique piece of MMO history. It is absolutely worth jumping in and checking out if you're a fan of MMOs or RPGs in general. But as you might expect, this is an old game and the community is barely holding on. That unfortunately has some real impact on the experience. First, in the PvE world, like I mentioned, the game is designed to challenge you throughout a campaign. And it can be quite frustrating to be working on a difficult mission and have no one around to strategize and work through it with. If you've got a few friends ready to dive into the game with you and you fill the rest with henchmen or heroes, you'll be alright. But if it's just you and henchmen, you're in for a bit of frustration. The henchmen do good work, but sometimes more positioning and strategy is required than you have access to as a leader of NPCs. And sometimes they just don't really listen. This is especially important when it comes to the end game. Once you finish a campaign, you unlock hard mode. You can explore areas and redo missions on a harder difficulty for better rewards. But finding a group for this type of thing can be tough. They're out there, but do you have the energy and patience to find them? Well, that's up to you. This is even worse in the PvP. which is unfortunate considering it's such a focal point of the game. The community is so small, you will find yourself entirely unable to access battles a lot of the time. There just aren't enough people to assemble a team. I literally had to go on Reddit and find out what days people play and which battles they would be participating in. It's not the end of the world, but it's not the kind of environment where you can just hop in and get competitive like you could back in the day. Now I should mention there is a Guild Wars 2. I played it back when it was released and it didn't quite grab me the way the first game did, and I ended up not playing very much of it. But it's changed a lot since then, and Riley and I have jumped back in to see what it's all about. We'll let you know. Guild Wars is a strange game to come back to in 2025. It's a fascinating artifact from an era when MMOs were still experimenting. It's not going to replace your main MMO, the player base is small, the PvP scene is barely alive, and playing solo can be a mixed bag, depending on how much patience you have for managing AI teammates. But if you're someone who loves smart design, thoughtful buildcraft, or just wants to experience this piece of the genre's history, Guild Wars is still worth checking out.
Much time has passed. Evil has returned.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to support the channel. And until next time, cheers.